The morning I got slapped with a $300 fine from the Meadowbrook Estates HOA for parking my industrial snow blower in my driveway. I nearly spit out my coffee all over my kitchen table. I stood there in my flannel pajama pants, staring at the bright orange violation notice that some HOA board member had apparently stuck to my front door at the crack of dawn. The paper fluttered in the cold January wind as I read through the ridiculous complaint. Apparently, my Ventrac snow blower, which I had purchased specifically for my snow removal business, violated Section 12.7 of the HOA covenant regarding unsightly commercial vehicles and equipment visible from the street. My name is Derek Jenkins, and I had lived in this upscale neighborhood in Naperville, Illinois for 3 years. The subdivision was one of those cookie sea-cutter developments where every house looked almost identical, painted in approved shades of beige, gray, or cream. The lawns were immaculate in summer, the holiday decorations were tastefully coordinated in winter, and everyone drove SUVs that cost more than my first house. I ran Jenkins Snow Removal, a business I had built from the ground up over the past 8 years. What started as me clearing driveways with a pickup truck and a plow had grown into a legitimate operation with 6 employees, 4 trucks, and enough equipment to handle commercial and residential contracts across 3 counties. The industrial snow blower sitting in my driveway was a beast of a machine, sure, but it was no different than seeing a plumber's van or an electrician's truck parked at someone's house. The difference was that this was my house, and apparently that made it everyone's business. I grabbed my phone and dialed the HOA management office, which opened at 8. A chipper voice answered on the 3rd ring. Meadowbrook Estates, HOA, this is Tiffany speaking. How may I help you today? Yeah, hi, this is Derek Jenkins from 2847 Oakwood Drive. I just got a violation notice about my snow blower, and I need to speak with someone about getting this resolved. Oh, let me pull up your file. I heard typing in the background. Okay, yes, I see the violation here. It was filed by our board president, Patricia Morrison. She documented the violation during her morning inspection yesterday. Morning inspection. I rubbed my temples. Look, that snow blower was only in my driveway for maybe 12 hours. I had just serviced it and needed to let the engine cool before putting it back in my garage. I understand, Mr. Jenkins, but according to our covenants, commercial equipment cannot be visible from the street at any time. The fine stands unless you want to appeal to the board at next month's meeting. Next month? That's 4 weeks away. Yes, sir. The board meets on the first Tuesday of every month. I can add you to the agenda if you would like. I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head. Fine. Add me to the agenda, but I want it on record that this is absolutely ridiculous. I will make a note of your concerns. Have a great day, Mr. Jenkins. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there in my kitchen, staring at my phone, feeling my blood pressure rising. The thing that really got under my skin was not just the fine itself, but the principle. I paid my HOA dues on time every quarter. I kept my lawn pristine. I had even volunteered last year to help organize the neighborhood block party, and this was how they thanked me. I walked outside to my garage and looked at the snow blower sitting innocently in my driveway. It was a beautiful piece of machinery, really. Orange and black, with a powerful engine that could chew through 2 feet of snow like it was nothing. I had invested $15,000 into this equipment, and it had already paid for itself twice over. My phone rang, and I saw it was my business partner and best friend, Marcus Chen. Hey man, you see the weather report, Marcus sounded excited. They are calling for 18 inches starting tomorrow night. We are about to make bank. Yeah, I saw. Listen, I got hit with an HOA fine this morning. $300 for parking the Ventrac in my driveway. Marcus whistled low. Seriously? That's insane. Tell me about it. I have to wait until next month to appeal it. Well, speaking of the neighborhood, I confirmed that contract yesterday. Meadowbrook Estates signed on for the whole season. Full snow removal for all common areas, entranceways, and the walking paths. It's our biggest residential contract yet. I froze. Wait, Meadowbrook Estates, my HOA. Yeah, man, I sent you the email last week. Did you not read it? I pulled my phone away from my ear and quickly scrolled through my emails. Sure enough, there it was from 6 days ago. Subject line: New contract Meadowbrook Estates HOA. I had been so busy with other jobs that week that I must have just skimmed it and moved on. Holy crap, I muttered. What? Marcus, they just fined me for my equipment. The same HOA that is paying us to clear their snow. Marcus started laughing. Oh man, oh that's beautiful, that's absolutely beautiful. This is not funny, they are charging me $300. No, listen, this is perfect. You know what you need to do? You need to go to that board meeting and drop this bomb on them. They want to fine you for having commercial snow equipment. Fine. But they should probably know that you are the one who owns the company they just hired. A slow smile spread across my face. You know what? You are absolutely right. Plus, that contract is worth what? $30,000 for the season. $32,000 according to the email. Exactly. So they are going to fine you $300 while paying your company $32,000. The irony is just chef's kiss. We talked for a few more minutes about the logistics for the incoming storm before hanging up. I went back inside, poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, and really read through the contract details. It was a comprehensive agreement. We would be responsible for clearing all common areas within 6 hours of any snowfall over 2 inches. We would also handle the main entrance, the clubhouse parking lot, and the 3 miles of walking paths that wound through the subdivision. It was a massive job, but we had the equipment and the manpower to handle it. And now, knowing that the same board that had fined me this morning was counting on my company to keep their neighborhood accessible, I felt a certain satisfaction building in my chest. The snow started falling right on schedule Thursday evening. By the time I woke up Friday morning, there was already 8 inches on the ground, and it was still coming down hard. I called Marcus and our crew, and we mobilized all our equipment. We had jobs scheduled all across Naperville, Plainfield, and Aurora. By noon, we had cleared most of our commercial lots and were moving on to residential contracts. I saved Meadowbrook Estates for last, partly because I wanted to make sure we had enough time to do it right, and partly because I was curious to see if anyone would recognize me. I pulled up to the neighborhood entrance in my F-350, which had Jenkins snow removal emblazoned across both doors in bold blue letters. Behind me, Marcus followed in our second truck, and behind him, 2 of our crew members drove a truck pulling a trailer with the very same Ventrac snow blower that had earned me the violation notice. The main entrance was buried under nearly 20 inches of snow by that point. We got to work immediately, our plows pushing the heavy white powder into designated areas, while the snow blowers carved clean paths through the deeper sections. It was hard, physical work, even with the machines doing most of the heavy lifting. The temperature was barely 15 degrees, and the wind cut through every layer of clothing. We had been working for about an hour when a silver Lexus pulled up and stopped near where I was directing one of my crew members. The driver's side window rolled down, and a woman in her mid-50s with a severely short blonde haircut leaned out. "Excuse me," she called over the noise of the equipment. "Are you the snow removal service?" I walked over, my boots crunching in the snow. Yes, madam. Jenkins snow removal. We are taking care of the HOA contract. Oh, wonderful. I am Patricia Morrison, the HOA board president. I just wanted to make sure you all were aware that we need the clubhouse parking lot completely clear by 5. We have a board meeting tonight. Of course, she was the board president. Of course, her name was Patricia. And of course, she had no idea who I was behind my winter face mask and goggles. We will have everything clear well before 5, madam, I assured her. Excellent. You know, we interviewed several companies for this contract, but your bid was very competitive. I hope you all can maintain this level of service throughout the season. We take pride in our work, Mrs. Morrison. You won't be disappointed. She gave me a curt nod and rolled up her window, driving carefully through the partially cleared entrance. Marcus pulled up beside me in his truck, his window down. Was that the board president? He asked. Yep, Patricia Morrison herself. Did she recognize you? Not even a little bit. Marcus shook his head, grinning. This just keeps getting better. Come on, let us finish up so we can get out of this cold. We worked for another 3 hours, clearing every inch of pavement in the common areas. The walking paths took the longest because they wound through some tight spaces between houses, but the Ventrac handled it like a champion. By the time we finished, the sun was setting and the neighborhood looked pristine. You could barely tell there had been a massive snowstorm. We packed up our equipment and headed out. As we drove past the clubhouse, I could see cars starting to arrive for the board meeting. Part of me wanted to stop and walk in there right now, but I knew I had to wait for the official meeting next month where I was on the agenda. That would be the proper time to address the violation. Over the next 3 weeks, we got hit with 2 more significant snowstorms. Each time, my crew and I cleared Meadowbrook Estates thoroughly and professionally. I made sure we did an exceptional job, going above and beyond what the contract required. We even cleared some of the snow from around the mailboxes and fire hydrants, things that technically were not in our scope of work. I received an email from the HOA management company after the second storm, complimenting our service and noting that several residents had called in to praise the snow removal company. Reading that email while looking at the $300 violation notice still stuck to my refrigerator with a magnet felt surreal. Finally, the first Tuesday in February arrived. The board meeting was scheduled for 7 at the clubhouse. I put on a nice button-down shirt and jeans, printed out copies of my business license, the HOA contract, and several photos I had taken of the equipment in question. I also brought the original violation notice. The clubhouse was one of those generic community buildings with a kitchen, a main room with tables and chairs, and a small office. When I arrived at 6:55, there were already about a dozen residents sitting in chairs facing a long table where the board members would sit. I recognized a few neighbors, and they nodded at me in greeting. At exactly 7, Patricia Morrison walked in, followed by 4 other board members. She was wearing a cream-colored pantsuit and carried a leather folder. The other members consisted of 2 men and 2 women, all appearing to be in their 40s or 50s. Patricia sat in the center chair and called the meeting to order. They went through the usual business of reading last month's minutes, discussing the budget and addressing a couple of landscaping concerns. I sat patiently, my folder of documents in my lap, waiting for my turn. Finally, after about 45 minutes, Patricia consulted her notes. Okay, next on the agenda we have an appeal from Derek Jenkins regarding a violation notice issued on January 8th. Mr. Jenkins, please come forward. I stood and walked to the front of the room, very aware that everyone was watching me. I placed my folder on a small podium they had set up and cleared my throat. Thank you for hearing my appeal. As you all know, I received a $300 fine for parking my commercial snow removal equipment in my driveway. According to the violation, I broke Section 12.7 of the HOA covenant. Patricia nodded. That is correct. Do you dispute that the equipment was parked in your driveway? No, I do not dispute that. The equipment was there for approximately 12 hours while I performed routine maintenance. However, I am here to appeal this fine on the grounds that it is both excessive and hypocritical. One of the male board members, whose name placard read Robert Chen, leaned forward. Hypocritical. That's a strong word, Mr. Jenkins. Let me explain. I pulled out the first document. This is my business license for Jenkins Snow Removal, which I have owned and operated for 8 years. This business is licensed, insured, and operates across 3 counties. I saw Patricia's eyes narrow slightly, but she did not say anything yet. Now this, I held up the second document, is a contract between Jenkins Snow Removal and Meadowbrook Estates, HOA. A contract that was signed on January 2nd of this year, 6 days before I received my violation notice. The room went completely silent. Patricia's face lost some of its color. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, I continued, keeping my voice level and professional. This board fined me $300 for having commercial snow removal equipment visible from the street. However, this same board hired my company to provide snow removal services for the entire neighborhood, services that require the exact same equipment you are fining me for owning. That is different, Patricia said quickly. The contract is with your business, not with you personally as a resident. But I am the business, Mrs. Morrison. I am the owner and operator. That equipment in my driveway, that is the same equipment we use to clear your walking paths, your clubhouse parking lot, and your entrance ways. Equipment that, by the way, every resident in this room has benefited from during the 3 major snowstorms we have had this month. I pulled out my phone and brought up the photos I had taken. In fact, here are time-stamped photos of that exact Ventrac snow blower clearing the walking paths just last week. The same machine you fined me for. One of the female board members, whose name was Michelle Stevens, spoke up. Mr. Jenkins, I think we all appreciate the excellent service your company has provided. But the covenant is clear about commercial vehicles and equipment. It applies to all residents equally. Does it though? I challenged. Because I see Tom Richardson, 3 doors down from me, parks his plumbing van in his driveway every single night. That is a commercial vehicle with his company name right on the side. I see Sarah Martinez parks her catering truck in her driveway on weekends when she has events. Are they being fined? Patricia shuffled her papers. Those situations are different. How are they different? Because they are not as large and unsightly as industrial snow removal equipment. Unsightly, I repeated. So this is actually about aesthetics, not about the covenant itself. You just do not like how my equipment looks. The covenant gives the board discretion in determining what constitutes a violation, Patricia said, her voice taking on a sharper edge. Interesting. So when it is convenient for you, you exercise discretion. But when it comes to equipment that you are literally paying me to use on your property, suddenly, there is no room for discretion. Robert Chen held up his hand. Mr. Jenkins, I think what we are trying to say is that while we value your business services, we still need to maintain certain standards for the neighborhood. Perhaps you could store your equipment at a commercial facility instead of your home. I could, I agreed. But that would require me to rent additional storage space, which would cost approximately $500 per month. That is $6,000 per year in additional overhead. Now, I am a businessman, so naturally, I would need to pass those costs on to my clients, including this HOA. Patricia's eyes widened. Are you threatening to raise our rates? I am not threatening anything. I am explaining basic economics. You are asking me to incur additional business expenses. Those expenses get factored into my bids and contracts. The next contract renewal would reflect the true cost of doing business under these restrictions. The board members looked at each other. I could see the wheels turning in their heads. They were doing the math, realizing that their $300 fine could end up costing them thousands of dollars in increased service fees. Furthermore, I continued, I have consulted with an attorney regarding this matter. Illinois state law has provisions protecting home-based businesses from overly restrictive HOA covenants, particularly when those businesses provide services to the community. My attorney believes we have a strong case if we were to pursue legal action. This was partially a bluff. I had talked to a lawyer friend who said I might have a case, but it would be expensive and time-consuming to actually pursue. However, HOAs hated legal threats. They usually backed down pretty quickly when lawyers got involved because their own legal fees could get out of control. Michelle Stevens spoke up again. Mr. Jenkins, perhaps we can reach a compromise here. What if you were to keep the equipment in your garage except when actively using it for jobs? That was always my intention, I said. The equipment was only in my driveway that one time because I was performing maintenance. It was never meant to be parked there permanently. And what about during peak season when you might need quick access to it? She asked. During peak season, the equipment is usually on my trailer, ready to go. It rarely sits in my driveway for more than an hour or two. Robert Chen looked at Patricia. It seems like this was an isolated incident that was blown out of proportion. Mr. Jenkins has been a good resident and is now providing valuable services to our community. I move that we waive the fine and consider this matter closed. I second that motion, Michelle said immediately. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but she was outvoted and she knew it. All in favor. 3 hands went up. Patricia did not raise hers, and neither did the 4th board member, an older man named George Winters who had not said a word the entire time. The motion passes 3-2, Patricia said stiffly. Your fine is waived, Mr. Jenkins. However, I expect you to keep your commercial equipment out of sight as much as possible going forward. I always have, I replied. Thank you for your time. I gathered my documents and walked back to my seat. Several residents turned to smile at me or give me quiet congratulations. I could feel Patricia's eyes burning into the back of my head, but I did not care. I had won. The meeting continued for another 20 minutes, covering a few more minor issues. When it finally adjourned, people started filing out. I was talking with one of my neighbors about the recent storms when Patricia approached me. Mr. Jenkins, a word please. I excused myself and followed her to a quieter corner of the room. Up close, I could see she was genuinely angry, her jaw tight and her eyes hard. You embarrassed me in front of the entire board tonight, she said, keeping her voice low. Mrs. Morrison, I simply defended myself against what I felt was an unfair fine. If you felt embarrassed, perhaps you should consider why you issued the violation in the first place. I issued it because rules are rules. Everyone in this neighborhood agreed to abide by the covenants when they purchased their homes. And I do abide by them. But when rules are applied selectively and without common sense, they stop being about maintaining community standards and start being about control. Her face flushed. How dare you? I dare because I am right. You wanted to flex your authority over me without considering the bigger picture. You did not even know I owned the snow removal company, did you? She did not answer, which was answer enough. I thought so, I continued. You saw equipment you did not like, and you decided to punish me for it without doing even basic due diligence. That is not leadership, Mrs. Morrison. That is just being petty. I think this conversation is over, she said coldly. I agree. Have a good evening. I walked away, leaving her standing there. On my way out, Marcus called me. How did it go? He asked. They waived the fine, 3-2 vote. Yes, I knew you would win. The logic was just too solid. Yeah, but I think I made an enemy of the board president. She is not happy with me. Who cares? You won and we still have the contract. That is all that matters. He was right, of course. I had achieved what I set out to do. The fine was gone, and I had made my point. But something about the look in Patricia Morrison's eyes when I walked away told me this was not over. February turned into March, and the snow finally started to let up. We had 2 more minor snowfalls that month, each one requiring us to service the Meadowbrook Estates contract. Every time I drove through those entrance ways with my trucks and equipment, I thought about Patricia Morrison and wondered if she was watching from her window, fuming. In mid-March, I received an email from the HOA management company. They were conducting a review of all vendor contracts and wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss our performance. I found the timing suspicious, but I agreed to meet with them the following week. The meeting was held at the management company's office in downtown Naperville. It was a small firm that managed about 20 different HOAs in the area. I met with their operations manager, a middle-aged man named Bill Thompson, who seemed friendly enough. Mr. Jenkins, thank you for coming in, he said, shaking my hand. Please have a seat. We sat in a small conference room with a view of the Chicago skyline in the distance, hazy through the March clouds. I want to start by saying that we have received overwhelmingly positive feedback about your snow removal services, Bill began. Residents have been very happy with the quality and timeliness of your work. That is great to hear. We take pride in what we do. However, we have had some concerns raised by the board president, Mrs. Morrison. She has expressed that there might be a conflict of interest with you living in the neighborhood and also providing services to the HOA. There it was. Patricia was making her move. I am not sure I understand what conflict of interest she is referring to, I said carefully. My company was hired based on our competitive bid and our reputation. The fact that I live in the neighborhood was actually seen as a positive during the initial discussions because it meant I had a personal stake in doing excellent work. Bill nodded. I understand that perspective. However, Mrs. Morrison has raised questions about whether your company can remain objective, particularly if disputes arise. She also mentioned the incident with the violation notice. The violation notice that was waived because it was improperly issued, I pointed out. Yes, I am aware. But you can see how this creates an awkward situation. Mrs. Morrison feels that it might be better to avoid any potential conflicts by seeking other vendors when the contract comes up for renewal. When is the contract up for renewal? End of October. But we typically start the bidding process in August to have everything locked in before the first snow. I leaned back in my chair. So what you are telling me is that despite excellent service and positive resident feedback, the HOA might not renew our contract because the board president has a personal grudge against me. I would not characterize it that way, Bill said diplomatically. How would you characterize it? He sighed. Look, off the record, I think Mrs. Morrison is being petty. You did nothing wrong and your service has been exemplary, but she is the board president and she has influence. If she pushes hard enough, the board might decide it is easier to just go with a different vendor than to deal with the drama. That is incredibly unfair. I agree, but that is the reality of working with HOAs sometimes. They can be very political. I left that meeting feeling frustrated and angry. I had worked hard to build my business, and I had provided excellent service to Meadowbrook Estates. The idea that I might lose a $32,000 contract because I had dared to stand up for myself was infuriating. That evening I called Marcus and filled him in on the situation. "Man, that is messed up," he said. "What are you going to do?" "I do not know yet. I need to think about it." "You could just let it go. We have plenty of other contracts. Losing this one would not break us." "It is not about the money, Marcus. It is the principle. I should not have to choose between standing up for myself and keeping a business contract. I get it. But sometimes you have to pick your battles." He was right, but that did not make it any easier to swallow. I spent the next few days thinking about my options. I could try to smooth things over with Patricia, maybe apologize even though I had done nothing wrong. But that felt like letting her win. I could also just accept that we would probably lose the contract and move on, or I could fight back. The third option became more appealing when I received another email from the HOA management company. This one was not from Bill Thompson but from Tiffany, the receptionist I had spoken to when I first got the violation notice. The email was brief and to the point. Apparently, Patricia Morrison had filed a formal complaint against Jenkins snow removal, claiming that we had caused property damage during one of our snow clearing operations. The complaint stated that our equipment had damaged a section of decorative fencing near one of the walking paths, and that we owed the HOA $1,500 for repairs. I immediately drove to the location mentioned in the complaint. It was a section of white vinyl fencing that ran along the side of the path near the community pond. Sure enough, there was damage. About 6 feet of fencing had been knocked over and partially broken. But here was the thing. I knew for a fact that my crew had not caused that damage. I remembered this particular section because we had actually been extra careful around it during the last snowfall. There were decorative rocks along the path, and we had used the walk behind snow blowers instead of the larger equipment to avoid hitting anything. I took out my phone and pulled up the photos and videos we routinely took during jobs. We had started doing this a few years ago as a way to document our work and protect ourselves from false claims. Sure enough, I had video footage from our last visit showing that the fence was already damaged when we arrived. In the video, you could clearly see the broken fence sections lying in the snow. The timestamp showed it was taken before we even started clearing that area. I also had photos from after we finished, showing the same damage, proving that we had not made it worse. I sent the evidence to Bill Thompson with a detailed email explaining the situation. I also pointed out that the damage appeared to be from wind or possibly from kids playing in the area, as there were no tire tracks or equipment marks anywhere near the fence. Bill responded within an hour, thanking me for the documentation and saying he would review it with the board. But I knew what was really happening. Patricia Morrison was trying to manufacture reasons to justify not renewing our contract. The fine had not worked, so now she was trying to claim property damage. I decided it was time to take a different approach. Instead of just defending myself, I needed to go on the offensive, not in an aggressive way, but strategically. I started by reaching out to several residents I had become friendly with over the years. I asked them if they would be willing to provide testimonials about our snow removal service. Within 2 days, I had written statements from 8 different residents, all praising our work. Some mentioned specific instances where we had gone above and beyond, like clearing snow from around their mailboxes or helping push a stuck car. I compiled these into a professional-looking document and sent it to Bill Thompson, copying the entire HOA board. I also started attending the monthly board meetings as a resident, even though I had no specific items on the agenda. I wanted to be visible and engaged, showing that I was not just a vendor but an active member of the community. At the March meeting, I listened as Patricia presented her complaint about the fence damage. When she finished, I raised my hand. "Yes, Mr. Jenkins," Patricia said, clearly not happy to see me. "I just wanted to address the fence damage claim. I have provided video evidence to the management company showing that the damage existed before our crew arrived. I am happy to show that footage to the board if needed." Robert Chen spoke up. "I have reviewed the footage and it does clearly show pre-existing damage. I think we can consider this matter closed." Patricia's jaw tightened, but she nodded curtly. "Very well. Moving on." After the meeting, Michelle Stevens approached me. "Mr. Jenkins, I want to apologize for all of this drama. Most of us on the board think you and your company do excellent work. Patricia has her own issues, but please do not think the entire board is against you." "I appreciate that, Mrs. Stevens. I just want to do my job and be treated fairly." "I understand. For what it is worth, when the contract renewal comes up, you will have my vote." That was encouraging, but I knew I could not count on board votes alone. I needed to build support among the residents themselves. If enough people wanted Jenkins' snow removal to stay, the board would have a hard time justifying a switch. In April, I did something I had never done before. I created a simple one-page flyer thanking the Meadowbrook Estates residents for allowing us to serve them, and listing out some of the services we had provided over the season. I included the total inches of snow we had cleared, the number of times we had serviced the area, and our average response time. At the bottom, I added a note saying that we hope to continue serving the community for years to come. I printed 300 copies and hand-delivered them to every house in the neighborhood over the course of a weekend. It was time-consuming, but I wanted that personal touch. Several residents came out to chat with me while I was delivering the flyers, thanking me for the great service and asking if I did residential driveways too. I handed out business cards and made several new individual clients from that effort. Patricia Morrison was not pleased with my flyer campaign. I knew this because I received a letter from the HOA attorney claiming that I was soliciting business door-to-door in violation of the no solicitation policy. I responded through my own attorney, pointing out that I was not soliciting. I was simply thanking residents for their business, which was protected speech. Also, the thank you flyer specifically related to the HOA contract, not individual residential services, so it did not even qualify as solicitation. The HOA attorney dropped it, probably because they knew it was a weak claim. But it showed me just how determined Patricia was to find something, anything, to use against me. May and June passed quietly. Without snow to clear, my business shifted to other services. We did landscape maintenance, lawn care, and spring cleanup work. The Meadowbrook Estates contract was inactive during these months, which gave everything a chance to cool down. In July, I received notice that the HOA would be putting out a request for proposals for snow removal services for the upcoming season. All interested contractors were invited to submit bids by August 15th. I knew this was coming, but seeing it in writing made it real. I spent several days putting together a comprehensive proposal. I included not just our pricing, which I kept the same as the previous year, but also detailed documentation of our performance, the resident testimonials, photos of our work, and a description of our equipment and process. I wanted to make it impossible for the board to reject our bid on anything other than personal reasons. Marcus helped me refine the proposal, making sure it looked professional and covered all the bases. We submitted it a week before the deadline, hand-delivering it to the management office to ensure it did not get lost. 2 weeks later, I learned that 3 other companies had also submitted bids. One was a small local operation similar to mine. The other 2 were larger regional companies that serviced multiple states. I did not know their pricing, but I suspected they would be competitive. The board was scheduled to review the bids and make a decision at their September meeting. That gave me 1 month to make sure I had done everything possible to secure the contract. I decided to take one more strategic step. I drafted a letter to the board outlining my commitment to the community and my company's track record. But instead of just sending it to the board, I posted it on the neighborhood's Facebook group, which had about 200 members. The post read, "To my neighbors in Meadowbrook Estates, as you may know, Jenkins Snow Removal has had the privilege of serving our community this past winter. We are proud of the work we have done and hope to continue this partnership. However, I want to be transparent with you all. There has been some tension between myself and the HOA board, stemming from a violation notice I received last January. While that situation was resolved, I believe it has colored some perceptions. I am asking for your support as the board considers renewing our contract. If you have been happy with our service, please consider attending the September board meeting or sending an email to the management company expressing your views. Ultimately, the HOA works for you, the residents, and your voices matter. Thank you for your consideration. Derek Jenkins." The post generated immediate response. Within hours, there were dozens of comments, almost all of them supportive. Residents shared their positive experiences, praised our quick response times, and several mentioned they had noticed the quality of our work compared to previous vendors. A few people asked what the specific issue was with the board, and I kept my responses professional, simply stating that there had been a disagreement about parking equipment, but that it had been resolved. I did not want to trash talk Patricia or the board. I wanted to take the high road. But then something unexpected happened. Another resident, a woman named Karen Henderson, posted her own comment. "I have been on this board before, and I know Patricia Morrison. She has a history of being vindictive toward residents who do not bow down to her authority. If she is targeting Derek, it is probably because he stood up to her. We should not let personal grudges dictate who provides services to our community." That comment opened the floodgates. Other residents started sharing their own negative experiences with Patricia. Stories about petty fines, selective enforcement of rules, and general power-tripping behavior. I had not intended for my post to turn into an anti-Patricia thread, but that was what was happening. I tried to redirect the conversation, posting another comment. "I appreciate everyone's support, but I want to keep this focused on the snow removal contract, not on individual board members. Let's stay constructive." It helped a little, but the damage was done. Or rather, from my perspective, the support had been established. It was now very clear that the community wanted Jenkins Snow Removal to continue servicing the neighborhood. Patricia Morrison responded the next day with her own post, which was predictably defensive. She claimed that the board always acted in the best interest of the community, and that all vendor decisions were based on objective criteria. She also said that residents should trust the board's judgment and not be swayed by emotional appeals. The post did not go over well. Several residents replied asking why, if decisions were based on objective criteria, she had filed a false property damage claim against my company. I had not mentioned that incident in my post, which meant someone else had brought it up. The whole situation was spiraling beyond my control, but in a way that seemed to be working in my favor. The September board meeting was packed. The community room at the clubhouse, which usually held maybe 15 residents, had at least 40 people crammed in. Word had spread about the snow removal contract debate, and people wanted to weigh in. Patricia looked visibly uncomfortable as she called the meeting to order. The first hour was spent on routine business, but the tension in the room was palpable. Everyone was waiting for the vendor discussion. Finally, Patricia announced that they would be reviewing the snow removal bids. "The board has carefully considered all 4 proposals," she began. "Each company has strengths and weaknesses, but we have to make a decision based on what is best for the community." Robert Chen interrupted her. "Before we go further, I think we should open this up for resident input. This is a significant contract, and I know many residents have opinions." Patricia looked annoyed but nodded. "Fine. If residents wish to speak, please keep your comments brief." Hands shot up around the room. For the next 30 minutes, resident after resident stood and praised Jenkins' snow removal. They talked about the quality of our work, our responsiveness, and the fact that having a local, neighborhood-based company was an asset, not a liability. A few people mentioned specific instances where my crew had helped them personally, going beyond the scope of the HOA contract. Only one person spoke against renewing our contract, an older man who said he thought it was inappropriate to mix business and residential relationships. But his comment was met with disagreement from several other residents. When the public comment period ended, Patricia tried to regain control. "Thank you all for your input. However, the board has a fiduciary responsibility to select the best vendor, not just the most popular one. We have reviewed the bids, and while Jenkins Snow Removal did a good job last year, we have an offer from Summit Snow Services that is $3,000 less for the same scope of work." I felt my stomach drop. $3,000 was a significant difference, and it gave the board a legitimate financial reason to switch vendors. But Michelle Stevens spoke up. "That is true, but Summit Snow Services is based in Rockford. That is over an hour away. Their response time will be much slower than a local company. Jenkins Snow Removal lives right here in the neighborhood. When we had that overnight storm in February, his crew was here clearing by 5 in the morning. Summit would not be able to match that." "Response time is important, but so is cost," Patricia countered. "We have to be good stewards of the HOA's money." Robert Chen pulled out a spreadsheet. I ran the numbers. "If you factor in the value of faster response times and the additional services Jenkins provided last year that were not in the contract, we actually got more value from them than we would from a cheaper vendor who only does the bare minimum. The $3,000 difference is negligible when you consider the total value delivered." The debate went back and forth for another 20 minutes. George Winters, the quiet board member who rarely spoke, finally chimed in. "I think we are overthinking this. Jenkins did a great job. The residents clearly want to keep him. Unless there is a compelling reason to change, I say we stick with what works." Patricia was clearly losing. She looked around the table and seemed to realize she did not have the votes. "Fine. Let's put it to a vote. All in favor of renewing the contract with Jenkins Snow Removal?" 4 hands went up. Only Patricia abstained. "The motion passes," she said flatly. "We will renew with Jenkins Snow Removal." The room erupted in applause. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had won, not through manipulation or tricks, but through good work and community support. After the meeting, dozens of residents came up to congratulate me. Several board members also apologized for the drama, assuring me that they had always supported keeping us on. Patricia left immediately after the meeting without speaking to anyone. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Over the next few weeks, I finalized the contract renewal with the management company. The terms were identical to the previous year, which was fine with me. I had not been trying to get a better deal. I just wanted to keep the work I had earned. October brought the first frost, a reminder that winter was coming. My crew and I started prepping equipment, servicing engines, and making sure everything was ready for another season. The Ventrac snow blower that had started this whole mess was running better than ever. On a crisp Saturday morning in late October, I was in my garage working on one of the trucks when Patricia Morrison pulled up in her Lexus. I was surprised to see her. We had not spoken since the board meeting. She got out of her car and walked up my driveway. She was not wearing her usual power suit. Instead, she had on jeans and a sweater, looking more human than I had ever seen her. "Mr. Jenkins, do you have a minute?" she asked. "Sure, Mrs. Morrison. What can I do for you?" She took a deep breath. "I wanted to apologize. I have been thinking a lot about everything that happened, and I realize I was wrong. I let my pride get in the way of common sense. I set down the wrench I had been holding. I appreciate you saying that. When I issued that violation notice, I honestly did not know you owned the snow removal company. But even after I found out, I should have just admitted the mistake and moved on. Instead, I dug in my heels and made everything worse." "Why did you dig in?" I asked, genuinely curious. She looked uncomfortable. "Because I did not like being challenged. I have been board president for 6 years, and I am used to people just accepting my decisions. When you stood up to me at that meeting, it felt like you were undermining my authority. So I tried to find ways to prove I was right, even when I knew I was wrong." "That is honest," I said. "I have also been doing some self-reflection after reading all those comments on Facebook. Some of the things people said about me were hard to hear, but they were not entirely wrong. I have been too focused on rules and control, and not enough on what actually makes this a good community to live in." "So what are you going to do differently?" I asked. "I am stepping down as board president. I am going to finish out this term, but I will not be running for re-election in January. I think the board needs fresh leadership, someone who can work with residents instead of just dictating to them." I was genuinely surprised. "That is a big decision. It is the right decision, and I wanted you to know that I will not cause any more problems for you or your business. You do good work, and you deserve to be treated fairly." "Thank you, Mrs. Morrison. That means a lot." We shook hands and she drove away. I stood there in my driveway, thinking about how strange the past 9 months had been. What started as a petty violation notice had turned into a neighborhood drama that ultimately led to real change. The winter season started in early November with a modest 6-inch snowfall. My crew and I cleared Meadowbrook Estates quickly and efficiently, just like we had the year before. But this time, there was no tension, no drama, just good, honest work. In January, the HOA held elections for new board members. Robert Chen was elected as the new president, and 2 younger residents joined the board, bringing fresh perspectives. Patricia Morrison remained on the board as a regular member but kept a much lower profile. The neighborhood Facebook group became more active and positive, with residents sharing information and supporting local businesses. Several people who had defended me during the contract debate became friends, and we started organizing neighborhood events together. My business continued to grow. The publicity from the Meadowbrook situation actually helped, as other neighborhoods heard about what happened and respected how I had handled it. I picked up 3 new HOA contracts over the next year, all of them worth even more than Meadowbrook. Marcus joked that I should thank Patricia Morrison for being so petty, because it had inadvertently been the best marketing we could have asked for. He was not entirely wrong. In March, a full year after the fence incident, I was clearing the walking paths after a late-season snow when I saw Patricia out for a walk. I stopped my equipment and waved. She waved back and walked over. "How is the season going?" she asked. "Really well." "Busy, but that is a good problem to have. I am glad. And I want you to know I have been watching your work all winter. You really do go above and beyond. I should have appreciated that from the beginning." "We all make mistakes," I said. "What matters is learning from them." She smiled. "You are more gracious than I deserve. Take care, Derek. You too, Patricia." As I watched her walk away, I thought about how much can change in a year. A conflict that could have turned into a bitter, drawn-out battle instead became an opportunity for growth and positive change. Not just for me, but for the whole community. The Ventrac snow blower sat on my trailer, orange and black and powerful, no longer a source of controversy, but just a tool doing its job. That was all it had ever been, really. Sometimes it takes a fight to remind people of what actually matters. By the time spring arrived, the whole incident felt like ancient history. The neighborhood moved on to other concerns, like playground equipment upgrades and whether to install electric vehicle charging stations at the clubhouse. Life in an HOA-governed community was never without its small dramas, but at least now there was a better process for resolving them. I continued to park my equipment in my garage, only bringing it out when needed, not because I had to, but because it made sense. That was the irony of the whole situation. Patricia's violation notice had been trying to force me to do something I was already planning to do anyway. If she had just talked to me like a reasonable person from the start, none of the conflict would have been necessary. But then again, if the conflict had not happened, maybe the neighborhood would not have had the wake-up call it needed about how the HOA was being run. Maybe Patricia would have continued her authoritarian approach, and maybe other residents would have been subjected to the same petty treatment. In a weird way, my industrial snow blower had become a catalyst for positive change. It was not about the equipment itself, or even about the fine. It was about standing up for what was right and not backing down when someone tried to abuse their power. The following winter season was even better than the first. We had refined our processes, knew the neighborhood layout perfectly, and had built strong relationships with the residents. When the contract came up for renewal again, there was no drama, no debate. The board voted unanimously to continue with Jenkins' snow removal, and Patricia Morrison was one of the yes votes. I expanded my business further, hiring 2 more employees and purchasing additional equipment. The reputation we had built in Meadowbrook Estates opened doors across the entire region. Other HOAs wanted to work with a company that was responsive, professional, and community-focused. Marcus and I even started a small consulting side business, helping other contractors navigate HOA relationships and avoid the pitfalls we had encountered. Turns out there was a real demand for that knowledge, as many small business owners struggled with the political nature of HOA contracts. Looking back on everything, I realized that the $300 fine I received that cold January morning was probably the best thing that ever happened to my business. Not because I enjoyed the conflict, but because it forced me to really examine what I was doing and why. It pushed me to build community support, to document my work more carefully, and to stand up for myself in a professional way. The snow blower still sits in my garage, ready for action whenever winter storms roll through. But now, when I look at it, I do not just see a piece of equipment. I see a reminder that sometimes you have to fight for what is right, even when it would be easier to just pay the fine and move on. The story could have ended differently. I could have paid the $300 and grumbled about it privately. Patricia could have succeeded in getting our contract canceled. The community could have stayed silent and let the drama play out without getting involved. But none of those things happened because people chose to engage, to speak up, and to push back against unreasonable behavior. That is what made the difference. As another winter approached and I prepared my equipment for another season, I felt grateful for how everything had turned out. My business was thriving, my relationships in the neighborhood were strong, and the HOA had become a more functional, resident-focused organization. The Ventrac snow blower fired up on the first pull, its engine roaring to life in my garage. I let it run for a minute, checking the gauges and listening to the smooth rhythm of the motor. Everything was ready. Another season was about to begin, and this time there would be no violation notices, no false accusations, no drama. Just good work, fair treatment, and a community that understood the value of supporting its own residents. That was worth more than any contract, any amount of money, or any petty victory over an HOA board. I pulled the snow blower onto my trailer and secured it with straps. The first snow was forecast for tomorrow night. My crew was ready, our routes were planned, and Meadowbrook Estates would wake up to clear paths and safe roads, just like they should. Because at the end of the day, that was what really mattered. Not the politics, not the power struggles, not who won or lost some bureaucratic battle. What mattered was doing good work, treating people fairly, and standing up for what was right when it really counted. That was the real lesson my industrial snow blower had taught me, and it was a lesson I would carry forward for the rest of my career.